So, how's everyone feeling right now? If you think on a scale of 0 to 10, maybe just, and if you want, feel free to put in the chat box what your number is. Maybe number 1 would be unbelievable anxiety, and number 10 would be unsustainable joy. So, I would imagine most of us are feeling pretty anxious right now. And that is completely normal. So what we're here today to do is to talk about some of the things that we can manage, right? We can't manage. I'm seeing everyone's about a 5, right? Yeah, that's about what I would expect. So what can we manage? We can't manage what's going on outside of our homes, out in the world. But one thing that we can is we can help to manage our health habits. And it's the one thing that we have control over. One of the reasons why everyone is panic buying and buying up all the toilet paper and cleaning the shelves off is because they want that sense of control in a world that feels really uncertain right now. And so what we'll be talking about today is how can you, in the things that we can control, how can you control your health habits? So what we'll talk about today is we're going to touch on the 4 pillars of health, which is stress management, sleep, nutrition, and exercise. We'll talk about some myths and facts, and then stocking up and using your pantry. All right, let's get started. So I just wanted to start too with this disclaimer that what we'll be talking about today in this advice is not to replace the most important thing, which is washing your hands and keeping them away from your face, right? That's the one thing that we totally can control. I know it's difficult. It was pointed out to me before I remembered that the video was on that I was actually touching my face. So as you can see, we're all working on that, right? What I did want to mention was the reason why washing your hands is so important is that coronavirus belongs to a group of known as lipid envelope viruses, which is a fancy word for saying they basically have like a layer of fat around the virus. And it's very similar to SARS, not necessarily the cold or flu. So every time we wash our hands, what we actually do is we break that little envelope around the virus and we disable it. And you can do that. Washing hands actually helps to dislodge the virus a little bit, but it also breaks the virus up and renders it useless. So that's, if you're kind of wondering why washing your hands is so important, that's kind of why. As always, please follow the advice of the public health experts and whatever the recommendation is there. But we're going to talk about the things that I know about today, which is the 4 pillars of health. So, which we had mentioned before. And so let's start with number 1, stress management. We know that there's a clear link between stress and our immune system. There's an upside of stress as well as a downside. In the short term, whether it be 24 hours, 48 hours, stress can actually boost our immune system, which is good to know. However, unfortunately, I think most of us now have been stressed for probably a little bit more than 48 hours. And that kind of chronic, ongoing level of stress can definitely decrease our immune system. So as much as possible, using mindfulness to calm your anxiety. There are a lot of apps out there. I know there's an app called 10percenthappier.com. And if you go to care@10percent.com, they have some free resources that you can use. They normally charge, I think, $99 a year. So that would be one resource. I know that you all have an employee assistance program, so making sure that you're managing them. And another thing that can be done too is to focus on the positives. What would be some of the positives that could come out of this, the silver lining? Do you have more time to spend with your kids? Time for projects that you never thought that you would get to? I have to say, I'm embarrassed to say, the kids, my children right now are painting their rooms. And I had promised them ever since they were, probably early teenagers that I would paint their rooms. Currently, they were like the toddler colors, bright yellow and bright blue. So finally, they're in high school now, and we're finally getting around to painting their room. So it is nice to have some of those things. So, it's not to say that we're still not worried about everything, but maybe looking to see what can we find that's good about this. Another useful kind of tip too is creating perhaps a worry time. And so instead of being anxious all day long, can you pick a time during the day where you can say, okay, now I'm going to think worst case scenario, I'm going to focus on all the negative things going on. But after that hour, I'm going to go back to maybe not thinking about what's everything that's making me anxious right now. Okay, so pillar number 2 is sleep. And we know, as is with the exercise as well as stress management, there's a clear link between sleep and our immune function. Sleep, there was just a study that came out that shows that sleep helps our immune cells attach to their targets, which is a good thing. So sleep is actually bidirectional with our immune system. We know that if we don't get enough sleep, it can decrease our immune system. But interestingly enough, we know that when we get sick, one of our defenses to help us to get healthier is sleep. So when we get sick, what do we want to do? We want to sleep all the time, and that's your body's way of helping it to heal. There's been a lot of interesting research too about circadian rhythms and what your body does at different times during the day. And there's a lot of suggestion that perhaps our immune function is more powerful at night than during the day, and also more powerful as we're sleeping than when we're awake. So what can we do to help sleep? One thing would be something called sleep hygiene. I don't know if you've heard of this before, but sleep hygiene really refers to all of the healthy habits that we use to get good sleep. So going to bed at a regular time. I know it's really easy right now to go to bed at later and later times because we don't have the same schedule. So as much as possible, trying to keep your normal schedule. If you normally go to bed at 11, try and keep that up instead of staying up, till 2 or 3 and then sleeping in. And then also making sure your room is dark, making sure that you have a comfortable temperature. So 65 degrees is the best. So all those things to help you get the best sleep. The pillars all build on each other. So when we manage our stress, which would be pillar number 1, it helps pillar number 2, which is sleep. Pillar number 3 is exercise, and that also helps sleep as well. So they're all kind of interconnected. And then lastly, one thing with sleep too is to watch our social media consumption. I don't think anyone has ever gone to bed at night and said, oh, gee, I wish I spent more time on Twitter. I wish I spent more time on Facebook right before going to bed, right? Said no one ever. So being careful that before we go to bed, we turn off the TV, we turn off our computer, maybe doing something relaxing, maybe work on a project or something that's gonna not make us more anxious before we go to bed. So pillar number 3 is exercise. And once again, you know what I'm going to say about this, that there are multiple studies as well showing that exercise can boost our immune system. And I don't know what it is by you, but I know by us here in Boston, a lot of our gyms are starting to close now. So we might kind of be out of our routine. What are some ways that you can still get some physical activity in every single day? Perhaps we have, I don't know if you may have heard of the New York Times 7-minute workout. This is great. It's 7 minutes. I don't think anyone of us can claim that we don't have enough time now, right? We probably have more time than we've ever had. And it's 7 minutes, and it brings you through different various exercises, push-ups and planks and a wall sit. And it's a really great way to get started if you're not used to maybe exercising on a regular day. And it's just 7 minutes. That would be one suggestion. There's a lot of YouTube videos that you can Google, and we'll have different things. You can take a yoga class. I'm noticing there a little typo that I missed. Dawn's class was from another another seminar that I held. But walking outside, as of now, would imagine most of us are still allowed to be outside and getting outside. And this is really important for several reasons. Number one would be just for our mental health, getting outside is really important. But I came across some interesting studies showing the effects of fresh air. And I have to admit, I first was introduced to this idea on Twitter. So, and we'll talk about some social media stuff. But fresh air was first introduced in the late 1800s as one of the only effective ways to combat tuberculosis. And they found that, the rate of death from tuberculosis was 90%. But then they started setting up all these hospitals where they would take their patients outside. And they noticed that with doing that, they were able to bring the rate down to 40%. The picture that you see there is actually a picture of a Boston area hospital in the early 1900s during the Spanish flu epidemic. And you can see what they did was they put the patients in tents, and then every day they would bring them outside and let them be outside. It's not really kind of what's known about being outside that's helpful. Maybe it's getting some sunshine, maybe it's ozone. So there's a lot of different theories out there. But my recommendation would be, as much as possible, open your windows, get some fresh air in, and as much as possible, try to get outside and take a walk outside every day. I have to admit, my kids are home with me now. I'm probably not the best homeschooling mom because I really have not been really diligent with making sure that they're doing homework, everyone. But what I do make them do 3 things every day, and one of them on their list that they have to do every day is get outside a little bit and get some fresh air, walking the dog and whatnot. So try and keep that in mind. So I had mentioned that I had seen this on Twitter, and so then I went to PubMed, which is where they put all the clinical studies to see, is there any validity to this? And there's a lot of things that we see on Facebook. I know all kinds of things are going around. This one was one that someone just sent with me that, that the gargling with warm water and salt and vinegar eliminates the virus. It actually does not. So it will not cure the new coronavirus. If you enjoy gargling with salt water, then by all means, continue to do that. And, but, don't do it with the assumption that it will cure the coronavirus. Unfortunately, it won't. So there are things like fullfact.org. You can go there, and that's a great resource for, whether things are fact or not. Of course, the CDC website, things like Snopes, those are all great places. So before you share something on social media, maybe just take a look at those and see whether it's true or not. And then pillar number 4. So as a registered dietitian, this is one of the things that, of course, I feel is one of the most important things. And one of the things that I always like to focus on with people is eating whole, real, unprocessed foods. And this is kind of, when you talk about the pillar of nutrition, it's whole, real foods. Why? Well, as Americans, it's said that we're overweight but undernourished. So we eat a lot of what's called macronutrients, would be things like fat and protein and carbohydrates, but we don't get enough micronutrients. So even though we're getting a lot of calories, we're actually not getting a lot of nutrition. We're undernourished. And why is that? That's because we're eating a lot of processed foods that really don't have a lot of these micronutrients. A lot of Americans have a zinc deficiency, folate, selenium, vitamins A, C, and E deficiencies. I actually met a girl, one of my jobs a couple weeks ago, I was doing some health coaching, and a girl sat down, and she was an intern, so I'm guessing she was around 20. She sat down and announced that she had scurvy. And my jaw literally dropped open. Like, how could a 20-year-old in today's environment have scurvy? Scurvy is a vitamin C deficiency that was, common amongst sailors in, the 1700s and 1800s because they weren't getting enough vitamin C. But I had never heard of someone here in the US having scurvy. And she said, yeah. She said, I have a toddler diet. and I only like macaroni and cheese and chicken nuggets and French fries. I never eat any vegetables. And so I now, was having all these joint problems. So I had to go to the doctor, and I have scurvy. So it was kind of a reminder to me that, yeah, some of these deficiencies really are, it's not something that you just read about in a textbook, but, people are sitting down in front of me and telling me about this. Okay, so what do we get from whole real foods, especially plant foods? We get something called phytochemicals. And we hear the word chemicals and we kind of worry like, oh, chemicals are bad. But these are chemicals that you find in plants. Phyto means plant in Greek. And these give their plants their color, their smell, their taste. So if you think of maybe carrots or some of the winter squashes, what phytochemical do they have? They have something called beta carotene, which is a powerful antioxidant. So these phytochemicals have biological properties, but are not established as essential nutrients. So every time we eat an apple or a banana or some cabbage, we might be getting hundreds of these different chemicals that really, and some of them haven't even been identified yet. What do these chemicals do for the plant? They help shield the plant from the sun. So you can see the sunscreen there. They help with protecting the plant from viruses, from bacteria, and they also help combat something called free radicals. Free radicals are like unstable molecules that can damage our DNA. So every time we eat plants, we get all of these chemicals that help the plant, and they do the same thing for us. So for example, if we took a banana and we looked at some of the phytochemicals that might be in a banana, a banana that's a whole real natural food, here's some of the phytochemicals that you would see. And, a lot of these are kind of scary sounding, 3-methyl-1-ethanoate. Like, what the heck is that, right? But these are natural chemicals in the plant that not only do they help the plant, but our body recognizes those and our body can use them. So some examples, that we're aiming for are these bright, vivid, naturally colored, fresh, real whole foods. Now, I use the word fresh. I'm going to back up a little bit on that because, we have to change things now, and not all the things that we're going to be eating now are fresh. But what can you stock up in your pantry that you're aiming for some of these whole foods? If you see some of the pictures there, I have salmon and blueberries. Well, you can buy those frozen and keep them in your freezer, because none of us are able to shop the same way that we normally do. Nuts and seeds and dried beans and whole grains and spices, these are all things that keep. We can buy, frozen broccoli. So we'll be talking a little bit more about that at the end too. So these all contain these phytochemicals that help our body. Unfortunately, this is called, the acronym for this is SAD, which is the Standard American Diet. And all these things here provide a lot of calories, but not a lot of nutrition. Maybe you could argue that the orange juice does provide a lot of vitamin C, which it does. However, orange juice is really high in sugar. And so the person that put kind of the slide together included some orange juice because of the amount of sugar in it. But you can see all those processed foods really contain little to no nutrition that our body can use to help keep us healthy. I always kind of chuckle. I don't know if you can see the SpaghettiOs there, but it looks like they put them on toast. I'm not sure who put SpaghettiOs on toast, but maybe that's a thing. All right, so I kind of wanted to pivot now to talk about some things, maybe especially that as we're looking to help our immune system and boost it a little bit in the right way, what are some things especially that we can include in our diet? And one of them would be garlic. I actually was at Costco 2 weeks ago when everything was starting to unravel, and I bought a huge bag of garlic, figuring, well, we're all going to be inside the house and we're not really going to see anyone. So if we smell like garlic, it's probably not going to be a big deal. But why did I buy a big bag of garlic? Because garlic is an immunity boosting superstar. It has antibacterial, antiviral, anti-cancer properties, anti-clotting. The list of studies, if you go to PubMed, just goes on and on and on. We know that the Egyptians were using already in like 1500 BC, that there's evidence that they were using garlic preparations for 22 different medical conditions because that they found. It was used a lot during the plague or the Black Death in the 1300s. And one of the things that was found was that the areas of the country, the people that ate a lot of garlic, they were not as affected as much with, the plague. And right now we don't have the plague; we have a pandemic now. So maybe garlic can help us too now. It was dubbed Russian penicillin was the nickname during World War II because apparently the Russians ran out of penicillin and would use garlic to help prevent gangrene with their soldiers. So why is garlic so powerful? It contains over 100 different sulfur compounds. And one of them that's formed is something called allicin. And allicin is known for, kind of that's what gives garlic many of its properties. So chop up some garlic, put it in your dishes. You can also, if you want, just on a daily basis, chop up a clove of garlic, mix it with some honey, and it's just take it off a spoon like that. My daughter, whenever she feels like she's coming down with a cold and she's got some big social event that she needs to be healthy for, she'll ask me to make her something called what we call fire water, which is 2 cloves of garlic with some hot water in the blender, some honey, and some thyme. And she drinks that down and she says it's absolutely awful, but she's pretty convinced that it's like the magic cure for helping her get better. So you can also try that out. What are some other foods that we want to focus on for just boosting your immune system? Red bell peppers are especially high in vitamin C. And yeah, maybe we're not getting the fresh red bell peppers now as much as we normally do, but there's some things that we can get that keep well. Citrus keeps in the refrigerated, it keeps for, usually at least a month. So stocking up on some oranges, some grapefruit, great source of vitamin C. Strawberries, you can buy them frozen. And also things like Brussels sprouts, kale, cauliflower, cabbage. These are all vegetables that if you do go to the store, they're a great thing to stock up on because they also keep. A whole head of cabbage and a whole head of cauliflower will keep at least 2 or 3 weeks. The kale and the Brussels sprouts, not so much. But surprisingly, they're really high in vitamin C, all of them. So finding some ways to include those. Fermented foods are a great thing to include as well. Our gastrointestinal tract is kind of the largest defense that our immune system uses. Oh, I'm noticing here, Clarence says roasted Brussels sprouts and cauliflower is awesome. Clarence, I totally agree with you. If you've had cauliflower or Brussels sprouts as a kid, that your mom like boiled them, I totally agree. They're absolutely awful, but the roasted ones are delicious. A lot of times as I'm making dinner, if I make a pan of roasted Brussels sprouts, I find myself picking on them while I'm making dinner. And then we'll sit down to dinner and the family will ask, like, what happened to all the Brussels sprouts? Why didn't you make all that many? It's because they are so delicious and I ate them in the kitchen. But anyways, back to fermented foods. Adding in any type of fermented food, things like yogurt. If you're not familiar with kefir is a cultured milk product that has, anywhere from 10 to 12 different types of beneficial probiotics or beneficial bacteria. And so adding some of that. Kimchi, sauerkraut, these are fermented vegetables. And those are also, really nice to have in your fridge because as we're not getting as many fresh fruits and vegetables as maybe we normally do because we're trying not to shop as much and trying to stay out of the stores, adding that kimchi, I'm seeing there, some people love kimchi. I love kimchi too. Kimchi, if you're not familiar with it, is a fermented cabbage it's a Korean dish. And it has a lot of garlic in it, also immune boosting, and has some hot pepper in it. And it just adds a really nice, bright, fresh, crunchy taste to foods. So stocking up on some of those as well. Because what we do know is that when we eat these fermented foods, that bacteria can now colonize in our gut and help to modulate our immune system and to help keep us healthier as well. So stocking up on some fermented foods. I'm not really big on recommending supplements at this point. I have a seminar that I do on boosting your immune system, and I talk about the various supplements that you can take. And I've kind of pulled back a little bit against recommending those supplements in this case. We know that SARS is a really novel virus. So the official word of the coronavirus is officially called SARS-2 coronavirus. SARS-2 COVID-19 is the official word. But anyways, we know that the way viruses enter cells in all different ways, and the way that this virus enters cells is different than colds or flu. And it uses something called an ACE2 receptor on the cells. And a lot of the things that maybe we would normally do to boost our immune system, there's two things. One of them would be that maybe they would increase these receptors. We don't know. And another thing that I'm worried about is over boosting your immune system. There's some, thought that maybe the SARS virus can hijack our immune system. So in my mind, the best thing we can do is to eat lots of whole, real foods, not overdo it on the supplements. There are two that maybe that you can think about that maybe I would recommend because of the way that they act. One of them would be zinc. If you wanted to, you can take a zinc supplement. You don't want to take too much, anywhere from 10 to 15 milligrams 4 times a day. So no more than 60 milligrams per day. And oysters. Now, I know none of us are going to have access to fresh oysters now, but you can also buy canned oysters. So if you're at the store or you're ordering food online and you happen to see some canned oysters, throw that in. Oysters are the only food that provides 100% of the daily value of zinc. They're really, really high in zinc. Beef, pork, lamb, also high in zinc. And what zinc does is it actually, we don't know what it does against the coronavirus, but we do know that against SARS, it interferes with the virus replicating inside of the cell. So because this is a kind of a SARS-like virus, zinc probably will do the same thing. And certainly then if you don't eat meat, things like cashew, sesame seeds, pumpkin seeds, garbanzo beans, lentils, those are all great zinc-rich foods as well. If you're taking a supplement, I recommend against doing the zinc. You can do the lozenges if you want. You can take like a zinc supplement pill. I do recommend against the nasal spray. They have changed the formulation of it. There was some concern a couple years ago that the nasal sprays were causing permanent loss of smell and taste. And my understanding is they've changed the formulation, but I think, just in an abundance of caution, I think it's better to do a supplement or the lozenges. And then copper, and this is me getting a little nerdy here, but anytime you take some zinc, you do want to make sure that you get some copper because zinc can interfere with the copper absorption. Basically, this is a long-winded way of me saying that add some dark chocolate into your daily meal plan. I happen to love dark chocolate. I made sure that was one of the things that I stocked up on. And just a square or 2 a day will add some copper into your diet and help balance out the effects of the zinc. But things like mushrooms, sesame seeds, spirulina can also provide some copper as well. And then lastly would be elderberry. If you're not familiar with elderberry, it's a berry that you can make a syrup out of. And you can either buy the syrup, you can buy the little gummies. And elderberry is also effective because it has compounds in it that destroy the lipid membrane of viruses. Remember, we talked about that lipid membrane, that when you wash your hand, it kills the lipid membrane. But elderberry can also prevent that attachment onto cells. So it's not necessarily boosting your immune system necessarily, but it's directly going after the virus itself. So if, I currently am not taking elderberry myself, but I do have the syrup in my pantry. And if anyone in the house is starting to show some symptoms, you can start, my plan is for them to start taking it. But certainly you could start taking it now as well. I would recommend taking it against longer than 6 or 8 weeks. Okay, so let's talk about building a healthy pantry. What are some of the things that you want to do as you go to maybe stock up, and the things that you're going to use? So on the left there, you can see the things that you can stock up that might add some flavoring to different foods. Things like making sure that you have some Dijon mustard, olives, garlic and onions. That not only are they add lovely flavoring to foods, but they're also both immune boosting as well. The onions have something called quercetin, which is an antioxidant that is also being studied right now as being particularly effective against the SARS virus. Chicken broth, stir fry sauces, enchilada sauce, capers, some dried fruit that you can add as flavoring to stews. You can also add it to some rice, to salads, so things like raisins or dried cherries. Then also some protein. What kind of protein can you stock up on? Canned tuna is always good. Sardines, I'm a particular fan of sardines because they provide a lot of omega-3 fatty acids. And omega-3 fatty acids are really good at downplaying inflammation, and are an important thing that we get. We don't, as Americans, typically we don't tend to get enough omega-3 fatty acids. Canned salmon, if you're not familiar with canned salmon, it is a much more economical way to eat salmon, and you get the benefits of salmon, but you have it there always at the ready. And I actually quite like it. I think it's pretty good. So don't poo-poo the canned salmon until you've tried it. It actually, if you buy the salmon that has the bones in it too, it's actually really high in calcium. So some things like some canned or some dried beans. I bought a 4-pound bag of dried pinto beans when I was stocking up, and I figured, anytime that I have the time now that I, can cook some dried beans. And once you cook them, the Instant Pot, if you have an Instant Pot, is a great way to do it, but you can also just do them on the stove. And you can use them, you can make soup out of them once you cook it. You can add them to a salad. You can put them on a tortilla and make burritos with them. There's so many things that you can do with dried beans. Yesterday, I mixed, it was a New York Times recipe, and I made a big pot of the pinto beans, and then I stir fried some garlic and oil and olive oil. I added some tomato paste, some smoked paprika, and then added the beans and some water, and then a bunch of cheese on top, and put it in the oven. And then we ate it over corn tortillas with some sauteed spinach. So it was really good. Nut butters and nuts. These are great things to have on hand. Super healthy. Make sure that you keep your nuts, once you open them, keep them in the fridge. Barley, whole wheat flour, quinoa, sweet potatoes. These would be all great starches to keep on hand. And sweet potatoes actually keep for a while. If you keep them in a bag and keep them out of the light, they will keep for a while. Bulgur, whole grain pasta. And then, of course, stocking up on some spices and herbs and some type of vinegar. And then the reason why if you use your nuts up quickly, you don't have to keep them in the refrigerator, but you don't want to keep them in your pantry for months. They oxidize, and they can turn rancid. So what was once a healthy type of fat can turn into an unhealthy type of fat. So you don't want your nuts going rancid. All right, some essential freezer and fridge items. Maybe stocking up on some frozen shrimp, some chicken, some frozen salmon, cod, corn, peas. Frozen berries are really nice to have because, as I had mentioned, we can't get to the store on a regular basis, and those are something that not only are they incredible healthy to include into our but they just are really nice to add to smoothies, to put on top of yogurt. Brown rice, quinoa, and barley, these are all grains that if you make a big pot of them, you can freeze them. They freeze very well. So taking some barley out, putting it on top of a salad, using it as a side, adding it to some soup. Barley is very high in something called beta-glucans, and you find beta-glucans in mushrooms, barley, as well as oatmeal. And these are also known to be immune boosting, these beta-glucans. So that's one benefit of eating some barley and oatmeal and mushrooms. Tortilla shells, I buy the whole wheat tortilla shells, and I also have some corn shells in the freezer as well. So you can make some fish tacos, pull out your frozen cod, chop up, hopefully you have some cabbage on hand. And so the vegetables that keep for a while longer, I'll talk about on the next slide, but there's some vegetables that will keep longer, and cabbage is one of them. I bought cheese, and I bought a big block. It's actually, I went to Costco maybe 2 weeks ago, and I bought a big 2-pound block of cheddar cheese. And when you buy it in a big block, you can just grate what you need, and it keeps much longer than buying the pre-shredded cheese, which can go moldy a lot faster. And the other benefit too is that if you see a little bit of mold on your cheese, your cheddar cheese, you can just cut that mold off, and the rest of the cheese is safe to use. Once your shredded cheese starts getting moldy, you need to throw the whole thing out because you can't cut it off. You can't get rid of it. Parmesan cheese is a nice flavoring to have. Eggs last for 5 weeks in the refrigerator. And not that we have to hoard anything. We don't need to buy crazy amounts of eggs, but you can buy, if you a dozen or two, and they do keep for a while in the fridge. Plain yogurt is great to put in smoothies. It's great to top with berries. We also use it in the place of sour cream sometimes. So if we're going to make a burrito, we use that. Some fresh ginger. Those are all great essential freezer items. So some of the vegetables that maybe you want to stock up on. This is from a website called Cook Smarts, and they're a fun little website it's a service that you can sign up for, and what they do is they do weekly menus for you. So you can head on over there and kind of check it out. They have some interesting stuff there. But things like cabbage, as I had mentioned, lasts for quite a while. Anytime you cut a vegetable, though, it won't last as long. So for example, if I buy shredded cabbage, it's not going to last anywhere near as long as buying a whole head of cabbage. Same thing for carrots. They'll last for, at least a month or more. Celery, ginger, lemon, limes, all these things last a long time in the refrigerator. Onions and potatoes, you want to keep them in a cool, dark place. I keep mine, in a paper bag. Winter squashes, things like butternut squash, acorn squash, those last for a long time, even just out on your countertop. So kind of a great thing to stock up on. I do find for myself that if I buy a whole head of cauliflower and a whole head of broccoli, that it does last for a while as well. And I know those are on the, not lasting as longer section. But things like asparagus, bok choy, spinach, you really want to use those up fairly quickly because they don't last as long. One thing that you can, as you're looking for different things to make, especially during this time, we're all concerned maybe about our budget. We don't want to throw food away. So grain salads are a great thing to make. So you can use up those leftover grains. So let's say you have some leftover barley, you have leftover brown rice, and you're wondering what to do with it. They actually make really nice salads. So add some acid, and acid would be something like vinegar or lemon juice, lime juice, some oil, salt and pepper. Look in your fridge and what herbs do you have? Do you have any, basil growing on a pot on the countertop? If not, you just use some dried. What veggies do you have? Some you can, if you have some cheese, maybe throw a little bit of cheese in there. And these make a really nice salad that you can use for your lunch. I know, I don't know about you, but I've got 2 kids at home, and I'm starting to feel like all I do is, spend time in the kitchen cooking, getting them lunch, getting them dinner. So having some things that you can make in advance and just kind of eat over a couple days is kind of nice, so that you're not having to do that every single day. Wraps are also something that you might want to think about. You can make your own hummus at home. So if you have from your pantry, if you have some dried chickpeas, you can cook them, add a little bit of lemon juice to it. If you don't have tahini, you can just use the roasted, toasted sesame oil, which will add that nice flavoring to it, and then some garlic. So you can make your own hummus, add some veggies, put it on a wrap. And when you look for wraps, look for the whole grain wraps, the 100% whole wheat. You can make something called bean and cheesers. My kids are complaining because they say that they're getting tired of bean and cheesers. Well, what is a bean and cheeser? A bean and cheeser is a food left over from their childhoods, hence the name. And it's refried beans on top of a tortilla, and then you add some cheese, you throw it in the microwave, and you melt the cheese, and then you can put toppings on it, like chopped cabbage. You can put salsa on it. If you have some cilantro, you can put some of that on it. And what's nice is that my kids could make it when they were young, so even, 10 and under, they can get the tortilla out, they can add the beans to it, they can put the cheese on it, and they can make it just, either as a snack or as a meal. They can make their own lunch if you're busy working and doing something else. So those would be options. This and just as a really creative way, this is an infographic from that Cook Smarts again, and it really shows you all the different ways that you can use up some of the things that you have. Let's say you have some leftover chicken and veggies. What can you do with a leftover chicken and veggies? Well, you can make some fried rice. You mix some eggs, rice, soy sauce, and frozen veggies. You could put them on top of a salad. You could make a soup with them. So using up all your ingredients and trying, various ways of using them, rather than throwing them out. Doing some meal prep too will also make you feel like you're not constantly in the kitchen cooking all the time. So as I had mentioned, cooking up some grains, some bulgur, farro, wheat berries if you have it. These are all really great grains, and they freeze really well. You can roast some chicken, if you have some salmon in the freezer, roast some veggies and potatoes, and then you can kind of make bowls. Bowls are really popular right now. So you take your grain, you add a protein to it, and then you can either add some salsa on top. You can also add, if you want to go more of like an Asian route, you could, if you had any teriyaki sauce, put that on top of all of it, and get creative. There, that sauce that you can see in the picture, that's roasted sweet potatoes with some chili powder, and it's over red quinoa and black beans. And then the sauce is made out of Greek yogurt and some lime peel and lime juice. And it makes kind of a fun little sauce to put over. So you may or may not have some more time right now. And one thing that maybe you can do is learn how to cook. Cook Smarts is a great resource. I had mentioned before, they have a lot of great ways to, lot of videos and just different tips. Getting something like Blue Apron and HelloFresh. Dave just sent me something yesterday saying like Blue Apron stock is up like 140% because people are actually home now and cooking, and it's a meal delivery service that maybe you want to think about doing. There's videos. So Cooks Illustrated, has this online cooking school. And there's another one that I just found out about this morning called Milk Street. And Milk Street now is offering free cooking schools, which is really great. So I think it's milkstreet.com, and that's a really great resource as well. So have some fun. And now's your time to experiment and maybe think outside the box a little bit with some of the ingredients that you might have. So use what you have on hand, but don't be afraid to make substitutions. So if you don't have, let's say a recipe calls for smoked paprika and you don't have smoked paprika, do you have any like chipotles in the chipotle peppers canned in the pantry? You could use those and some paprika, some regular paprika. Do a Google search for ingredients. So one time I had done a food demonstration and I had like 3 pounds of cabbage left over, and my family was like, we are not eating any more coleslaw. And so I went to Google and like, okay, what can I do with cabbage? And one of the recipes I found was cabbage enchiladas. And so you stir fried cabbage, you put it in with some refried beans, you made an enchilada, added some sauce. And my son, who was probably 7 at the time, said, these are the best enchiladas you've ever made. So, who knew? I would have never thought to make cabbage enchiladas, but that's what I had. So that's what I did. So make an effort to try some new ingredients, some new spices, veggies, and just keep in mind we are all in this together. There's a lot of resources that you can use, and trying to make the best of undoubtedly a bad situation, but how can we make the best of it? So thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you for those that added in some comments in the comment section. I see that looks like I'm seeing now that kale in the pan with red wine, vinegar, lemon, and salt. Oh, that sounds delicious. So I